The animation industry was not in the best place in the 1980s. Disney, due to expense, was considering shutting down its historic animation studio, and its much-needed renaissance was still far in the distance. Meanwhile, Hanna-Barbera had only produced one major hit in the 1980s with the Smurfs. Not to mention that animation was continually being shipped overseas. And yet something was about to change. While Paul Germain and Jeffrey Townsend were busy at the offices of Gracie Films, something special was happening on Seward Street. Gabor Chupo and his wife Arlene Klasky had managed to land the Simpsons shorts. Now all they had to do was make them. And that would require a team of animators that were young and hungry. So hungry, in fact, two of them were ready to say goodbye to the animation business entirely. And if they had left, The Simpsons would certainly be very different. Bill Kopp is an energetic, lifelong animator and a pack rat. He still has original Simpsons drawings in his storage units at undisclosed locations. This is Bill's voice when he played Eek the Cat on a show he later created for Fox Kids.
It's swell, it's crazy, it's chartreuse, which is a green, actually, but it's much more fun to say chartreuse when you have a lisp.
And this, well, this is Bill's regular speaking voice.
Oh, God. Okay, listen, this goes back to, The Simpsons was my, third official job. You know, there was Better Off Dead, One Crazy Summer, and right after One Crazy Summer. And we did those back-to-back. So, and Wes was on there, and so was David. All of a sudden, we were, out of work for, the first time ever. Wow, what do we do? And then Wes was the one that got Gabor contacted. I don't know how.
Wes Archer, animator.
I studied at Cal Arts in the Film Graphics Experimental Animation program. At Cal Arts, there were two animation schools that were very segregated. The Disney school, they wanted you to learn how to animate Disney characters such as Bambi and 101 Dalmatians and the like. The Film Graphics Experimental Animation, the title states, very experimental. You could do anything. It was geared more for television. At the time, I had no interest in studying Disney movies. I thought I would go to Cal Arts, learn how to animate, and move back to Texas and work on commercials. And I was always looking for work, and I solicited work from them. I called them, just cold called them, and dropped off my portfolio there. You know, it was kind of a freelance situation where I would go work at Gabor's studio at Klasky Chupo on Seward Street on individual commercials or whatever, work he had for me as an animator. The first spot that I worked on for Klasky Chupo was promoting the idea of this new thing called a CD. You could listen to Phil Collins, and yes, I animated an old Victrola turning into a record player, turning into a cassette player, turned into a CD player. So one day he said, hey, Wes, we have the possibility of animating these shorts for Matt Groening, who does Life in Hell. I was very enthusiastic about that, because at the time I was pretty much ready to give it up and move back to Texas and re-educate myself as an illustrator and a painter and just try to, have a career as an artist, because animation wasn't paying the bills very well. Oh, I was serious. I was in a crappy apartment in Burbank, and actually I was giving myself 2 more months in L.A. And at the beginning of that 2 months, I got a call from Klasky Chupo about the Matt Groening project. And then it began in earnest, the 3rd month. And, I could pay my rent, and I knew I could move to a better place, so I broke the lease on the apartment and moved to a better place. Well, before I got there, he said, are there any other animators you could recommend? I'm like, sure, Bill and David.
Bill Kopp, animator.
And he's like, hey, they're short cartoons. They're 1.5 minutes down at this place called Klasky. It wasn't even called Klasky Chupo then, I don't think. It was just the sewer. I don't know what it was called.
It was this really funky part of town. It was all old prop houses and little editing room. Really weird, old Hollywood. We used to call it Film Town. And those places were populated by the grumpiest, old men that all worked on all these movies. And they're, smoking, and there's nitrate film around. They didn't give a shit. I learned a lot from those guys, but it was a fishing boat.
Wes Archer, animator.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, the whole area around the Seward Street was this old film town, and it was kind of creepy. It was kind of David Lynchian. You would go out to eat somewhere, and there'd be these old editor guys. And one time on a job for Klasky Chupo, they sent me down the block to do some rotoscoping for some cheesy sword and sorcery film or something. It was like a scene out of a David Lynch movie where I walked through this vast old Hollywood hallway, Art Deco building, where there was this downshooter Oxbury camera or something, and the old crusty old guy set me up to rotoscope this footage. I would sit there and, quietly for 4 hours tracing some footage for some old school effects animation. So it was kind of the end of the old Hollywood, I guess.
And so we just rolled in there, and there was Gabor, who's like the nicest guy in the world, a crazy little, like a hobbit, And we just parked it there. Jesus Christ, we were there for like 2 years or 3 years or something, close to 3, I think.
I think that there were 2 cartoons that were on the Tracy Ullman show, and one was Dr. Nagatu by a comic book artist. I think she was out of San Francisco, called M.K. Brown. I think she had stuff in National Lampoon or whatever. And then Matt, of course, had Life and Hell, in L.A., or The Reader, and later, I think, the L.A. Week. They were each like a minute and a half, and it was me and Wes Archer. Originally, it was just the 2 of us working with Matt and M.K. Brown. And a minute and a half of animation is, 3 minutes, really, with the 2 pieces. It was too much work, because we had to live there anyway.
The work in itself was very trying. It took hours and hours. I remember I didn't have much of a social life. I felt like, we were kind of these monks. But I just remember having a lot of hope for the future. That I remember having a lot of hope that this job would lead me to a good future in animation, which it did.
And we were doing everything. We were animating, doing the backgrounds. We had to take Matt's storyboards, which were really funny because they were just like, drawn by a 3-year-old. It was great. His ideas were awesome. So we needed another guy, so we got Silverman. We hired David Silverman.
David Silverman, animator.
And then, believe it or not, I was considering leaving animation, or at least taking a respite from it, and just focusing on my own style, thanks to the encouragement of a friend of mine from UCLA days, Gary Baseman, who, of course, is a very famous artist. First started as a very successful illustrator, commercial illustrator, before he completely went to fine art. And he was doing very well at the time, and he told me he had done that. He had taken a year off and just worked on his style for the full year. That was his job, like 9-to-5 job. And I thought, that sounds intriguing. So that was the plan for 87. And then I heard from Bill Kopp via Wes Archer that this company he used to work for, or had worked for, Wes that is, had freelanced for Klasky Chupo whenever they would get like a character animation piece. Mostly they did motion graphics, which was before computer graphics took over in terms of like titles and logos. There was something called motion graphics, which simulated that by taking to several passes and backlighting effects and top lighting effects, things like that, with a motion control Oxbury camera. And they had gotten, the small company, Klasky Chupo, had gotten the Tracy Ullman Show contract. And basically, at the time, Klasky Chupo consisted of Arlene Klasky and Gabor Chupo, and Larry and Bill Hedge, the cameraman, and Joe Russo was an assistant. I forget the name of the receptionist. And they were renting out basically the bottom couple of offices from Sodi Clampett at 729 North Seward off of Melrose. So you see, I remember this stuff a little bit. And that's what happened. So I got called up and said, oh, yeah, it sounds interesting. And I loved it. It was sold to me like something called The Tracy Ullman Show. Who's Tracy Ullman? I don't know. But the animation is with Matt Grading. And, I love Life in Hell. That would be great. I'd love to meet him, and I'd love to try to animate his characters. And that's how it started. But here's the thing that was interesting about it. I almost didn't do it because then I got a call back, I think it was from Bill, or maybe Wes, saying, they didn't get the budget they wanted. They can only hire 2 animators. And I said, okay, that's fine. I still have plan A. I didn't think one way or the other of it. And then I got a call on, I think it was March 11th. They called me and they said, we really could use your help here. We're so overwhelmed with work. Gabor brought me in, and I thought it was going to be just for 2 weeks because he said, do you want to animate the opening title sequence of the Tracy Ullman Show with the letters flying in? Or do you want to do, help out with this animation for 2 weeks? I said, I'll help out with the animation for 2 weeks. And I guess it was a day or two into it. Gabor really liked my work, and he said, because they contracted for a minute a week and they were going over, and he was paying so many extra for every second they was over, he said, I have more than enough to hire you on as a third animator, so we're going to do that. I said, okay, great. So that's how it happened. And then we did 2 weeks of Dr. Janice Fidatu, and then we did 2 weeks of The Simpsons. And we continued with The Simpsons for 48 action-packed, fun-filled episodes. Here's the thing. I had planned to visit my parents back in D.C. I didn't want to cancel. It was harder canceling a trip then, and it's pretty hard these days, too, for that matter. But in any event, I had to go back east, and I hadn't finished the very first Simpson, episode, The Goodnight Simpson. I had the last segment, so I was still working on the last segment where the kids run into bed, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Now everybody go to sleep. So here I am. I brought my work with me, and I didn't have an animation desk, obviously. This was back when you needed an animation desk. So I brought a peg strip, like an inking strip, and I had a piece of plexiglass. So I took this peg strip and taped it to the peg bar, taped it to the plexiglass, and got a lamp and took up the lampshade, and that was my animation desk. I rested the thing on my knees. And then I'm running out of animation paper on a Sunday in Maryland. So there's not a lot of stores that you can go running to get some more animation paper. In fact, there's none of them. And I had to finish it off. This had to be clean animation because it had to go to Georgie. I think I had to FedEx it on Monday because she needed it Tuesday, and I was going to be back to like Wednesday or something like that. So I kind of worked with 3 pieces of paper. I said, oh, these will be my roughs. And I would make sure these are animating, and then I would do my cleanup drawings, and I'd erase those 3 pieces of paper and start over again. So I was animating 3 pages at a time, and I just sort of barely made it without wasting too much paper. It was forced frugality on a Sunday in Maryland back in 1987.
When David Silverman says Georgie, he means Georgie Palouse. Palouse is a Hungarian color designer. She'd worked on George Carlin's specials and would eventually do work on the animation of Dino DNA in Jurassic Park, but she was about to start work on what she would be known for. When others said flesh tone, Georgie said yellow, and yellow it would be.
I was trained in Hungary. In Budapest, they have one of the best animation studios, and I was working at Curtin Friend in Los Angeles. For over 35 years, we did tons of very important commercials, film titles. When Gabor came to America, tried to get a job in an animation studios, he wasn't able to, how shall I say, he didn't get a job in a studio that I worked at Curtin Friend. But we were a small studio. And my husband and I, we were both freelancing with Gabor in a freelance basis. So basically, Gabor didn't hire me. What happened, this is where Paul Germain comes in a picture. When Matt Groening was ready to do his animation special, Paul Germain, God, it was my husband, and wanted to know if Robert would be interested to do an animation special for a different artist. And my husband wasn't really wanting to do that. And no Curtin Friends who we worked with, they were very busy and successful. My husband was the one who recommended to try Gabor. So that's how Gabor got involved with The Simpsons, thanks to Paul Germain and my husband. I was working in my own studio in Pasadena. I would do the work and then I would come in. I always have worked very independent, so I would just come in with a product. When we were doing a Trace Salmon, there was 2 artists, M.K. Brown and Matt Groening. Matt Groening was completely independent. M.K. Brown, her stuff was more subtle and more sophisticated. She had ideas, but she basically let me do what I wanted to do. A story goes, in a lobby, he designed a Simpson family, which is very different what they drawn today. They give me the drawing, and I was looking at them, and I had an idea how this family should look. I wanted to be very different. I never met Matt Groening, so I was basically on my own. I knew he was working in black and white before, and that was wonderful because it's like an interior designer getting an empty space, and she can do or he can do whatever they want. Because his drawings are kind of charmingly primitive. It's not your regular animation design. And I wanted to do something very different. I wanted to get away from people being standardized, like black and white and good and bad. To me, yellow sounded really good. Yellow is basically very close to white. And I chose a warm yellow. You definitely want to be sure your animated characters read over a background. But I wasn't choosing it so scientifically. I really wanted to look good. That's what animation is about. It doesn't have to be what we think it's supposed to be. We can use our imagination and we can create and put surprises out. I wanted them to be individual people. I know they're going to interact. I remember a baby I picked purposely blue because she was a little girl. And I think one was green. I wanted to make her hair black color, but I didn't want it to use black. She could be sitting next to Homer and they would work very well together, but they would complement each other. I'm looking at it as a painting.
Bill Kopp, animator.
And then it was just three of us for a long time. So we just camped out in this one big room we had there. And we listened to Bob and Ray, and Tom Waits he had Rain Dogs that come out, and we loved that.
David Silverman, animator.
We listened to Tom Waits' Rain Dogs, which inspire us to drink more whiskey. And we would also listen to, I think we were also listening to Bob and Ray a lot. It's almost a pity, because Bill was saying, man, why don't we do a documentary on them while we still can? And we said, yeah. We didn't exactly have careers where we're at leisure to do these projects on the side, you know what I mean? Because we had to work, as opposed to like, oh, now we can do it. But yeah, we were big fans of Bob and Ray and Tom Waits. They kind of worked together with us.
Wes Archer, animator.
Gobbler was in charge. He was pretty much hands-off. You know, we just worked as a crew. Gobbler would kind of look at what we did and laugh and make comments and say, great stuff, guys. I mean, it was a super fast schedule. We had 1 week to animate the entire short. So that's why it kind of looked really funky like that, is we just took Matt's drawing and pretty much went with it. We didn't even have model sheet or final design turnaround of the characters, no official storyboard approval. We just took his drawings and ran with it. So it was the three of us in a room animating all day, every day. Started trying to standardize the characters and what they looked like. Season 1 was coming to a close. I think that's when Bill went into his own career kind of writing and directing. And
right around the time Roger Rabbit came out, we all freaked out, went to see that in the Cinerama Dome. And then I left the show because I was kind of done with the Simpsons. I was like, oh, I wasn't like, no one will ever go anywhere. I was like, it was really cool. But Silverman was the guy that really tidied it up and honed the look. And I just wasn't that interested. And I had an offer from Disney to go be the head of story on the Roger Rabbit shorts unit. You know, Tummy Trouble and Roller Coaster and all that. And that was like, because I was still, you know, really thinking animation. So that was like, you know, graduate work for me. I was like dying to get in there. That was a great experience because I was just back like with my CalArts buddies.
But David and I were really trying hard to, you know, figure out this cartoon and how the characters worked. We would take a drawing that we thought was good, one of the better ones, and put it on the wall and start drawing like that one and following that one and deciding, you know, which mouth shapes work better, the proportions of the head, how many spikes on Bart's hair. I think it was David and I that arrived at Bart has 9 spikes. David was drawing like 11 or 12. I was drawing like 6 or 7 or 8 spikes. So 9 or 10, 9 was kind of in the middle. And that was like a big deal, actually, like how many spikes in Bart's hair. And then like you get into the animation design where, you know, how high are the eyes on his forehead? How tall is his forehead? How much does the mouth stretch? All those details.
David Silverman, animator.
I don't know. I just remember looking over each other's shoulders saying, how are you drawing Bart this week? Oh, how are you drawing Homer this week? I will say this. We were freelancing. And when they worked it out, I guess, for whatever, tax reason, they didn't pay us a salary per se. They played us as if we were contracted for 40 hours of work a week. But we were doing more like 70 or 80. I mean, we were just working all the time. But, I didn't mind it. I felt very compelled and invested in trying to do something. If no other reason, I thought this would look good in my portfolio, But at the same time, I was delighted that, hey, this is our artwork on a primetime network show. It's not us doing storyboards at Ruby Spears or character designs at Hanna-Barbera or layout, Filmation. This is our actual animation being on a primetime show. Maybe it's worth investing something. So that was my attitude about it anyhow. I think everybody else's too.
That investment skyrocketed when James L. Brooks took the shorts long form. But according to a Brooks interview with The Hollywood Reporter, the idea to turn the shorts into a sitcom actually came from David Silverman.
He was the one who I think is as responsible for The Simpsons being a series as anyone, because he accosted me drunk on a Christmas party, office Christmas party long ago, and just spilled out passionately how there hadn't been an animated series on television for a quarter century at that time, and how much it would mean to animators to have a series out there with animation. And I was really impressed. And I think that moment led to doing the series as much as anything.
I remember talking to him like that. I guess I thought I was more sober than he said I apparently was. But I did talk to him about it. I don't know if I didn't stop the party and make a speech, but I did talk to him. I guess I may have said maybe a couple of sentences continued, and I ran on a bit. But it was like, oh, there he is. Okay, I'll say hi to him. Thought I was being just cool and calm and collected, but I didn't know what the look on my face was. That was Jim's POV, which I did not have any camera to verify what it was like. She said that I accosted him. I think I introduced myself to him. I think I get drunker with every retelling the story. But I imagine, I don't know, because I don't know how drunk I was. Because if you had a few drinks, you have no idea. But I probably had a cup of courage to meet him because I wanted to meet him. The respect I had for him was extremely, and still is, of an extremely high level. I find him to be just a walking genius. Based on, this is only based on the work that he had done, from, Mary Tyler Moore's show to Terms of Endearment, even to Room 222, and of course Taxi and Broadcast News. So it's like, this is a real guy that really knows about comedy and pathos and heart. At the 100th episode party of the Simpsons series, I saw Jim at the bar, and Jim turned to me and said, David, do you remember when you first introduced yourself to me? And I was like, really kind of flabbergasted. I said, no, Jim, I do, but I didn't think you remember. He said, oh, no, I remember very well. And he essentially recounted the same story. And he said that basically you came up, you had a few, clearly, and you took your hand out and introduced yourself. And he said it was something along the lines of, I'm really glad to be doing some great adult animation on a primetime show, and that there hadn't been something like this in 25 years, and it would be great if this could be a show on its own, or something like that. I think it was one of the factors. I don't think it was the factor. I think it was a factor. So I'll take some credit, but I certainly won't take the lion's share. I suspect part of it, too, was I think Matt certainly had an enthusiasm to want it to be a series. If that helped it become a show, I'm glad I spoke up.
When it got greenlit to go to series, we were like, oh, great, this is our chance to direct. The animation business there was really depressing, but the good thing we had going for us when it started to pick up again is that at that time there weren't a lot of trained animators, or there weren't a lot of people in the animation business looking for fresh work. I mean, a lot of people, I think, were dropping out of the animation business. So when this new project came up, I was able to get on as a director because there weren't very many out-of-work animation directors who had the kind of new sensibility to do a show like this. David worked on some half-hour kid show, I think, at Ruby Spears, but I'd never worked on a half-hour show. We thought, along with Gabor, it might be best to bring in someone who has directed half hours to kind of show us the ropes. As the season began, we were both given director slots, and then we had to hire 2 or 3 other directors. So we hired one guy who had experience, and we hired Rich Moore and Greg Vanzo. as well, and they hadn't directed half hours either. This other guy had, and then he kind of tried to show us the rope, and that guy's episode came back, and it was kind of a disaster. I'm not understating that. It was a disaster. He didn't really take what David and I had developed and use it very well. So the original episode 1 was Babysitter Bandit, and that's the one everyone had to kind of help fix. So it became episode 13. David is actually, they had him kind of take the lead to fix that episode. David's episode, which is episode 2, came back looking good. And then my episode 3, came back looking good, or pretty decent. And that was a big relief. That proved that the first episode, the disaster, was uplift. I think that director was kind of fired, or I think they told Gabor Chupo that they had to, they didn't want to work with him anymore. And I think that's when David kind of really took the lead and sort of was on his way to becoming like Mr. Simpsons, the Simpson director they would look to. But during season 1, it was really kind of everyone was kind of feeling their way through this animation process that we thought hadn't really been done since the Flintstones.
First thing I did was I did the title sequence. I worked with Matt Groening and Sam Simon on working out what the gags would be, and then I figured out everything beyond that. The whole opening sequence, starting with the slow pushes in, and then the skateboard, and the whole staging and the whole bit. We had to invent a gag for Lisa because she didn't really have a character, and it was in that meeting that she got her character, thanks to Jim Brooks, because we didn't have a gag for her because she didn't really have a defined personality in the 1-minute shorts per se. It kind of became apparent because we had a gag for every other character except not a clear one for Lisa. I just put in some lame gag there for no other reason to hang a light on the fact that we don't really have something for her. I, of course, suggested, what if she plays in the band and what if she plays the tuba? And Jim Brooks said, well, I don't like the tuba, but what if she played the baritone saxophone? In fact, what if she played it really well? She could be the genius kid of the family that nobody appreciates. And boom, Lisa had a character. And later on that day, they started writing an episode called Moaning Lisa. So that's how that stuff works.
The first Simpsons short aired on April 19th, 1987. And almost 30 years later, David Silverman directed the Simpsons movie. Wes Archer went on to direct a multitude of Simpsons episodes, and also the pilot of the acclaimed King of the Hill, for which he became the show's supervising director. Bill Kopp went on to animate for the lauded Roger Rabbit shorts, created Eek the Cat, and Snookums and Meat for the Disney Afternoon. He's working on a new show, Dumb Bunny and Jackass. Georgie Palouse continues to work at her art studio, and she's still just as vibrant as the colors she gave to that family of 5 all those years ago.
My friend called me one day and said, you are in Playboy. I'm going, what? So I went to one. Excuse me, do you sell Playboy? No, we don't sell Playboy. So I went to a liquor store and I said, I'm in Playboy. And they said, what? Anyhow, Matt Groening got an interview in Playboy, and it's June 2007. And it says, he gave me 2 credits for the very first time. They asking him, how tall is your mother's hair? And he says, in the 1960s it was very tall. Was it ever blue? No. That's another tribute to Georgie Palouse. And then here in first it says, why do they have yellow skin? He says, originally they were black and white outlines. For TV we needed color. I thought a conventional weird pink that passes for Caucasian would look repulsive. He wanted flesh color. That's not true. So it says, so when it came to give a skin color, the animation colorist, Georgie Palouse chose yellow skin. She has never gotten proper credit. After, almost 10 years? But that's animation. That's film industry for you, not just animation. Film industry in general. But it's a wonderful word. And as Matt Groening calls himself a father of a Simpsons, I call myself a mother of a Simpsons.